All right, so today we're going to take a deep dive into Delta Corp.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they're a pretty big player in the Indian gaming scene.
Yeah, casinos, that kind of thing.
Exactly. So we've got their financials, both the standalone and the consolidated ones for the quarter, and 9 months ending December 31st, 2024.
Ah, fresh off the press.
Yeah, plus we've got the auditor reports from Walker Chandiok & Co. LLP.
Okay, so we're going all in on this one.
We are, and I think our listeners are probably pretty familiar with Delta Corp, at least by name.
Yeah, they're pretty prominent, especially when it comes to casinos.
Right, but they're not just about casinos, are they?
No, not at all. They've actually got their hands in a few different pots, you could say.
Okay, like what?
Well, they've got the online skill gaming, the hospitality sector with their hotels and resorts.
Ah, so they're really trying to cover that whole entertainment experience.
It seems like it, yeah.
So let's start with the big picture, the consolidated results for the quarter.
All right, let's see what we've got.
Well, their total income is sitting at over 200 crores.
Healthy.
And the profit margin seems pretty good too. But are these numbers actually showing growth, or are things slowing down compared to last year?
Yeah, that's the key question, isn't it?
Well, and here's something interesting I noticed.
What's that?
It looks like while the casino and hospitality divisions are doing well, their online skill gaming division is actually operating at a loss.
That is interesting, especially since that whole online gaming sector is supposed to be booming.
Yeah, it makes you wonder about their strategy there.
Definitely a bit of a head scratcher.
It is. It's like they're taking a gamble on a sector that's not quite paying off yet.
Well, speaking of gambles,
Oh, right.
there's that massive GST controversy that's been swirling around Delta Corp.
Yeah, the elephant in the room, right?
Exactly. And we're not talking about small change here. They're facing some pretty serious allegations of short payments.
Yeah, it's how much are we talking about?
The authorities are claiming that Delta Corp owes a whopping 23,207.30 crores.
Whoa.
Yeah, in GST. And this is for almost 6 years of operation.
Wow, that's a huge chunk of change.
It is, and the crux of the issue is that the authorities are saying GST should apply to the total value of all bets placed.
Okay, so every rupee that goes into the pot.
Right. But Delta Corp is pushing back, saying that GST should only be calculated on their net gaming revenue.
So just what they keep after payouts, not the whole pot.
Exactly.
Well, that's a pretty significant difference in interpretation.
It is, and it could have some major implications, not just for Delta Corp, but for the whole Indian gaming industry.
Right, so where do things actually stand legally right now?
Well, Delta Corp hasn't just been sitting back, they've been fighting this.
Good for them.
Yeah, they've managed to obtain some stay orders from high courts.
Okay, so they've bought themselves some time.
Yeah, but there's a twist. The Union of India wants everything moved to the Supreme Court.
Oh, so this is heading for a showdown.
It looks that way, and I think a lot of people in the gaming industry are going to be holding their breath to see what happens.
For sure. So with this legal battle going on, there are naturally concerns about impairment.
Right, that makes sense.
Essentially, could this GST issue end up impacting the value of Delta Corp's investments in its subsidiaries?
Yeah, because they've poured a lot of money into those companies, and now there's this big question mark hanging over everything.
Exactly. So how's Delta Corp responding to all of this?
Well, publicly at least, they're putting on a brave face.
Okay, what are they saying?
Well, their management is saying that they don't need to set aside any provisions for impairment just yet.
So they're confident those subsidiaries will successfully defend themselves.
Yeah, basically they're saying this whole GST thing is going to blow over.
Okay, so they're putting a lot of faith in their legal team.
They are, but there's actually one more layer to this whole thing that we need to unpack.
Oh, what's that?
It's their revised composite scheme of arrangement.
Sounds complicated.
It is a bit jargony, but basically they're trying to streamline their corporate structure.
Okay, and how does that work exactly?
Well, it involves a few of their subsidiaries, and the details are, well, they're pretty complex. But the bottom line is that it could have a big impact on how they operate. Think of it like consolidating your bank accounts. You know, you're simplifying things, but it also changes how you manage your money.
Ah, so it's about efficiency.
Exactly.
So big changes could be coming behind the scenes at Delta Corp, even if we don't see those changes reflected in the financials just yet.
Right. And this restructuring is actually set to take effect next year.
Oh, so it's happening soon.
Well, there's a catch.
What's that?
It's still pending approval from a bunch of regulatory bodies, including the National Company Law Tribunal.
Oh, so until they get the green light, it's all just a plan on paper.
Right. It's all very much up in the air.
Okay, so lots of moving parts here.
For sure. A lot to keep an eye on.
It definitely seems that way. Delta Corp's story is far from over.
Oh, absolutely. This is just the beginning.
So this whole GST controversy, it really is like a high-stakes poker game, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, definitely high stakes.
And it seems like the stakes couldn't be higher for Delta Corp. What's the worst-case scenario for them if they lose this whole legal battle?
Well, if the courts decide to side with the authorities, it could be pretty devastating, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about that potential 23,207.30 crores payout.
Exactly. And that's not just a financial hit that could really jeopardize their entire stability.
Right, it's not like they could just shrug that off.
Not at all. And I think it would send shockwaves through the whole Indian gaming industry.
Oh, for sure. Everyone would be watching this case very closely.
Absolutely. It would set a precedent, you know?
Yeah, other gaming companies would have to reevaluate their own tax liabilities.
Right. And you could see a domino effect, a lot of uncertainty, disruption.
And investors would definitely get nervous.
Oh, yeah. It could put the brakes on growth for the whole sector.
So let's flip the script for a second.
Okay. Yeah.
What happens if Delta Corp wins? What does that mean for them and for the industry as a whole?
Well, a victory for Delta Corp would be a huge win for the whole gaming landscape, honestly.
How so?
Well, it would validate their interpretation of those GST regulations.
Okay, so it would be like a green light for everyone else.
Exactly. It would provide some much-needed clarity for the whole industry.
So a win for Delta Corp is a win for the industry.
That's the general idea, yeah.
It would boost confidence, maybe even attract new players to the market.
Right. More investment, more growth.
Okay, so this legal battle, it really does feel like a make-or-break moment.
It does, for Delta Corp and for the Indian gaming industry as a whole.
So, based on everything we've seen so far, how do you assess their chances of winning this thing?
Well, they've gotten those stay orders, which suggests their arguments have some weight.
Yeah, that's a good sign, right?
It is, and their public statements, they really seem to believe they have a strong legal standing.
So they're not backing down.
Not at all, but we can't ignore the fact that the Union of India is really pushing for this to go to the Supreme Court.
Right, and that adds a whole other layer of complexity.
It does. It makes things a lot more unpredictable.
No matter what happens, it sounds like the ramifications of this case are going to be significant.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's going to shape the future of gaming in India for years to come.
So let's zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture.
Okay.
The Indian gaming industry has been growing like crazy in recent years.
Oh, yeah, it's been exploding.
And Delta Corp's been a big part of that, haven't they?
Oh, they've been leading the charge, especially in the casino gaming sector.
Right, and their move into online skill gaming shows, they're not afraid to diversify.
Yeah, they're trying to tap into those new markets.
But this whole GST controversy,
Yeah.
it really throws a wrench into their plans, doesn't it?
It does. If they're forced to make that massive payout, it could really derail their expansion plans.
Yeah, and it could slow down their growth significantly.
And it could even have a ripple effect on the entire industry.
How so?
Well, if other companies get spooked by this, the possibility of similar legal challenges, they might think twice about investing and innovating.
Right, it creates a lot of uncertainty. So this whole situation raises a pretty important question.
What's that?
What role should the government play in all of this? I mean, they have a vested interest in a thriving gaming industry, don't they?
Of course, a well-regulated gaming industry can be a huge economic driver. It creates jobs, attracts foreign investment.
Even boosts tourism.
Exactly.
So what's the solution here? How can the government create a level playing field for companies while still protecting taxpayer interests?
Well, I think clear and consistent tax regulations are key.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The government needs to eliminate that ambiguity and provide clear guidelines on GST applicability.
Right, so we don't have situations like this with Delta Corp popping up all the time.
Exactly. That kind of confusion and legal battles don't benefit anyone in the long run.
Definitely not. So transparency and predictability, those are essential for businesses to thrive.
They are. The government needs to create an environment that encourages innovation and growth while ensuring fairness.
I agree. So let's shift gears a bit and talk about Delta Corp's corporate restructuring plan. Earlier, we mentioned their revised composite scheme of arrangement.
Right, that mouthful.
Yeah. Could you unpack that a little bit more? What does it actually entail?
Sure. So essentially, they're trying to reorganize their corporate structure.
Okay, and how are they doing that?
It involves merging or amalgamating certain subsidiaries with the parent company.
Okay, so what's the driving force behind this whole restructuring? What are they hoping to achieve?
Well, there are a few potential benefits, streamlining their operations.
Okay, making things more efficient.
Exactly. Reducing administrative costs, simplifying their structure.
So it's about making their business leaner and more agile.
Exactly.
And that could make it easier for them to raise capital, maybe expand into new markets.
Right. But we can't ignore the fact that there are some risks involved, too.
Of course. What are some of the potential downsides?
Well, merging companies can be pretty complex and disruptive.
Yeah, it can create uncertainty for employees.
Exactly. And there's always a chance those projected cost savings don't actually materialize.
Right, so it's another gamble for Delta Corp,
It is another calculated risk.
which seems to be their style, making bold moves.
It does. It's what makes them such a fascinating company to follow.
They're always pushing boundaries, constantly evolving.
And their story is far from over.
And now, before we wrap up part 2, let's talk about something we haven't touched on yet.
Okay, what's that?
Delta Corp's international ambitions.
Oh, yeah. They're not content with just dominating the Indian market.
It seems that way. They're venturing beyond India's borders looking for new opportunities.
They are, and they've set their sights on some pretty interesting locations.
Like where?
Well, Sri Lanka, Nepal, even Europe.
Wow, that's pretty ambitious.
It is a global strategy.
So what's driving this expansion? What are they hoping to achieve by going global?
Well, I think it's all about diversification, spreading their risk.
So they're not putting all their eggs in one basket.
Exactly, and they're tapping into new customer bases, going after a global clientele.
Right, trying to capitalize on that growing demand for gaming and entertainment worldwide.
Makes sense.
It's a smart move strategically, but going international always comes with its own set of challenges, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Different regulations in each market, cultural nuances to navigate, the complexity of managing operations across borders.
Not to mention currency fluctuations and political risks.
Oh, yeah, all those factors can really impact their profitability.
So international expansion holds a lot of potential, but it's not without its hurdles.
For sure, it's another high-risk, high-reward game for Delta Corp.
And they seem to thrive on that,
They do. It's what makes them so captivating to follow.
always pushing the envelope.
Always.
So for those interested in the global gaming scene, Delta Corp's international ventures are definitely worth keeping an eye on.
Oh, yeah, I agree. Their success or failure in these new markets could have a big impact on their growth and their position as a global player in the industry.
So as we wrap up part 2, it's clear that Delta Corp is at a pretty pivotal point in their journey.
It is. They're battling legal challenges, pursuing ambitious restructuring plans, expanding into new territories.
It's a dynamic story, and it's still unfolding.
It is. A lot of chapters left to be written.
So we've covered a lot of ground with Delta Corp. Their financials, the legal battles, their expansion plans.
Yeah, it's been quite the deep dive.
It has,
Oh.
but now I think it's time to step back and look at the bigger picture.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, the ethical and social implications of the gaming industry as a whole.
Ah, yeah, that's a big one.
It is. It's a topic that always sparks a lot of debate.
For sure, there are a lot of concerns out there.
Right, concerns about responsibility, regulation, the impact of gaming on society.
Yeah, it's not all fun and games, pun intended.
Right. So let's address some of the potential downsides. What are some of the things that critics bring up when they talk about the gaming industry?
Well, addiction is a major one.
Yeah, it's like any activity that triggers those pleasure centers in the brain.
Exactly. It can become a real problem for some people.
And that can lead to some pretty serious consequences.
Oh, yeah, financial ruin, relationship problems, even health issues.
It's a real issue that we can't just ignore.
Definitely not.
Another criticism is the potential for exploitation.
Right, especially of vulnerable individuals.
Yeah, there's this concern that gaming companies might be targeting those who are more susceptible to addiction.
Or those who might not fully grasp the risks involved.
Exactly. It raises questions about responsible marketing practices.
Yeah, the duty that companies have to protect their customers.
It's a fine line, isn't it, between entertainment and taking advantage of vulnerabilities?
It is. Gaming companies need to be operating ethically and responsibly.
Absolutely. It's about finding that balance.
And prioritizing the well-being of their customers.
Right. And let's not forget about the potential social costs associated with the gaming industry.
Yeah, that's another big one.
Critics often point to things like crime, social isolation, a decline in productivity.
All potential consequences of excessive gaming.
And those concerns are amplified by the rise of online gaming.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's so much easier now to engage in excessive gaming.
Right. It's accessible from anywhere at any time.
The digital age has definitely changed the gaming landscape.
It has, and we need to be mindful of the potential risks.
Who do?
So while the gaming industry definitely has its benefits, there are some downsides that we need to acknowledge and address.
It's a nuanced issue, no easy answer.
Right, it requires careful consideration.
Then a balanced perspective.
So let's bring this back to Delta Corp. How do they address these ethical and social concerns?
Well, they do emphasize responsible gaming practices.
Okay, where do they do that?
On their website and their marketing materials.
Okay, so they're putting the information out there.
They are. They provide information on how to recognize the signs of problem gambling, setting limits, seeking help.
So they're trying to educate their customers.
Yeah, and they also have policies in place to prevent underage gambling.
Okay, that's good.
And they offer assistance to customers who might be experiencing problems.
So they're making an effort.
They are, but there's always that question is self-regulation enough?
Right. Some people argue for stricter government oversight.
Yeah, that's the other side of the coin.
On the one hand, stricter regulations could protect vulnerable individuals.
And mitigate those negative social consequences.
But on the other hand, too much regulation could stifle innovation and economic growth.
Right. Some people believe individuals should have the freedom to make their own choices.
It's a tough one. It's about balancing individual freedom with the responsibility to protect society.
A classic dilemma.
It is, and it's complex. No easy solutions.
Definitely requires ongoing dialogue and a willingness to adapt as the industry changes.
All right, let's shift gears for a moment.
Okay.
Let's talk about the economic benefits of the gaming industry.
Okay. Yeah.
It's not all doom and gloom, right?
No, not at all.
When it's managed responsibly, the gaming industry can actually be a really powerful engine for economic growth.
Yeah, it creates jobs, generates tax revenue, attracts investment.
And it's not just the direct economic impact.
Right, it supports a whole ecosystem of businesses.
Exactly. Hospitality, tourism, technology, all sorts of things.
And as the industry grows, especially in emerging markets like India, that economic impact is only going to become more significant.
So how does Delta Corp specifically contribute to India's economy?
Well, they're a major employer. They provide jobs for thousands of people.
Okay, so that's a big plus.
It is. And their operations generate a lot of tax revenue for the government.
Which can then be used to fund public services and infrastructure projects.
Exactly. And their expansion plans, both domestically and internationally, are likely to create even more economic opportunities.
So they're really a significant player in India's economic landscape.
They are.
So it's important to acknowledge both sides of the coin, the potential downsides, and the economic benefits.
It is about finding that balance, promoting responsible gaming, while also harnessing the economic potential.
And that's a challenge that Delta Corp and the entire gaming industry need to face head-on.
It is. The future of gaming, both in India and globally, is going to be shaped by the choices made today.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the world of Delta Corp.
It's been a fascinating one.
It has. We've covered a lot. Their financial performance, the legal battles, the ethical implications.
A lot to unpack.
And I hope this deep dive has given our listeners a more informed perspective on Delta Corp and the wider gaming landscape.
I hope so too.
As you continue to follow Delta Corp's story, remember to ask questions, consider different viewpoints, and draw your own conclusions.
The story's not over yet. There's a lot more to come.
Until next time, keep those minds sharp and keep exploring.